What's up, y'all? We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I'm your host, Justin Michael. Hope everybody is having a great week so far. A lot to get into. It's been kind of a crazy week. Spent the weekend at Blue Arena in Loveland watching Gabriel Landeskog's return. That was really fun. The Eagles' atmosphere is pretty epic. The tickets, I know, in the regular season can be a little bit pricey at times, and obviously the ticket prices for this particular weekend were pretty crazy. But if you're ever looking for a fun experience in Northern Colorado, Eagles games definitely have a really awesome atmosphere. It's intimate, like a college hockey experience. So is the rowdiness of it all. A lot of crowd participation. It's just really cool. And obviously, seeing Landy return was just really special. I mean, I think it's one of the more unique storylines in Colorado sports history. But obviously, with all the Avalanche stuff I'm doing as well, I've been a little bit all over the place. I also was able to spend some time on campus this week. Appreciate Daryl Blair's sports reporting class for listening to me ramble for a couple hours. Always kind of cool to connect with the students, to reflect on my experiences, all that fun stuff. Kind of funny. Had never been really invited back. Now all of a sudden I'm getting invited back to campus all the time, which is very humbling, and it means a lot to me, as does the support that I get from all of you guys. So shout out to everybody rocking with us this morning live on YouTube. If you want to say good morning in the Toyota chat, I'd appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up, all that fun stuff. We've got a fun show planned for you today. I'm going to get into CSU football a little later on. We're going to play some clips from following the second scrimmage, where Jay Norvell talks about trying to build depth, particularly with some of the key positions where, maybe the Rams haven't had quite as great depth at times. Gets into the quarterbacks. We talk a little bit of wide receivers. I'm going to play interviews with AJ Noland, rising star in the secondary, as well as Tay Lanier, who is somebody who I think has a very bright future at wide receiver. Lot to get into on that front. Starting to get a little bit better idea of who the guys we should have an eye on going into fall are. I think the Rams wide receiver core maybe not going to be quite as deep as we anticipated. I mean, obviously with the loss of Lewis Brown, Kojo Antwi's injured at the moment. Armani Winfield has not really been participating in spring. So it's not really the names we anticipated coming in. But I do think there are some guys that are in line for a nice season and can be productive for you out wide. So we'll get into that. At the very end, I'll get into a controversial topic of late, which is jersey retirement. Obviously, a lot of debate of late just based on what happened with the other college football program in the state, their decision to immediately retire Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter's number, drawing all kinds of bold takes from every part of the field. I think there's validity to the impact that those guys made in terms of reviving the program and making it more relevant again. I also think it's kind of disrespectful to some of those that came before. I'll give a couple of thoughts on that, and more importantly, we'll focus on it from a CSU standpoint, talk about who I feel like should have their jersey number retired for CSU football. It's a really small list, and I think it should be one of the most, if not the most exclusive honor that you can receive. I think it means more than, the College Football Hall of Fame, and obviously the CSU Athletics Hall of Fame, anything like that. It really is the ultimate honor that nobody is ever going to wear that number again. So plenty to dive into as this show goes on. We are going to start here with a little bit of hoops news at the beginning. If you missed it over the weekend, myself and Kevin Lytle, we broke the news Saturday afternoon that Brandon Rechsteiner has committed to CSU men's basketball, 4-star transfer from Virginia Tech. He was a 4-star high school recruit, also listed as a 4-star transfer in this process. So all 4 of the known commitments / signees as of now were either a 4-star player coming out of high school or viewed as a 4-star transfer this time around. 6'1", 185-pound point guard. Played in 32 games this past season. He started 15 of them. I kind of watching him on film, admittedly didn't see a ton of Virginia Tech basketball this past year, The ACC in general was just not a great watch for a lot of the season. But he is a 3-level scorer. He is somebody that can burn you from deep. He's a confident jump shooter, loves that pull-up J. So you like that he has the ability to create for himself, which is intriguing. He's not quite as refined in terms of being a facilitator as Isaiah Stevens, which is to be expected. Almost nobody is. I wouldn't say, at least based on what I've seen so far, and it's obviously a really small sample size, so we don't want to get too carried away. But I don't think his handle is going to be quite as nasty as like Kyan Evans, who was slick. I mean, we saw it in the NCAA tournament, his ability to create space for himself, to, launch shots from deep and then hit him at a high clip. It was next level, and that's why he got $2 million to go to North Carolina. But there's a lot to like about Brandon Rechsteiner. He's a natural athlete, comes from great bloodlines. His father, Scott Steiner, is a wrestling legend. A little aside, didn't get enough love online for the fact that Rechsteiner's dad is Big Papa Pump. Maybe the chat in the audience not as familiar with mid-2000s TNA wrestling as your boy J Mike is. Used to be on like Fox Sportsnet on the afternoon. AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. There was a bunch of big time names that came out of it. But Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner, one of the greatest promos of all time, his infamous math promo about having 143% chance of winning the 3-way match or whatever it was. But I'm excited. It's cool to see that type of presence. It's kind of random that the daughter of Brock Lesnar and the son of Scott Steiner are now both at CSU. If there were to be a battle royale that took place in a wrestling setting, I think CSU would be well positioned. Especially, we got to remember Hidatora Hanada, former sumo wrestler on the football side. I think he's accepted an invitation into the WWE like training program. They take a lot of college athletes, so maybe we'll actually see him in the ring. He's the cousin of Braun Breaker, who's one of the biggest stars in the world today. So it brings a little bit of visibility. I know wrestling is silly, but it's a big deal. And I would say in 2025, with kind of some of the revival we've seen with wrestling and in terms of its relevance in pop culture of late, it's something that could have a little bit of value for CSU, having somebody like Scott Steiner on the sideline and getting to post that. But more importantly, it gives you a legitimate option at point guard, which I think was a big question. There was a lot of excitement for the 2 and the 3 guards that CSU was able to go out and get. Josh Pasquarelli from Marist, considered a top 10 combo guard in the portal this cycle. He's somebody who I think can be one of the biggest additions in the conference. Jace Butler still has a really high ceiling. Didn't get a chance to play a ton as a freshman, but he's somebody who's got a great looking jump shot, highly athletic. And Kerry Booth, obviously, is somebody who has a really nice athletic profile. 6'11", gives you, or 6'10", whatever he's listed at, gives you a little bit of size and just a caliber of athlete that maybe CSU has not had in the past. But Rechsteiner running the point, I think, in this CSU offense is somebody who we really can see make a major leap. I think the structure around him is something that will benefit him greatly. I think more ball movement. I think more movement, period. Again, it's a pretty small sample size in terms of what I've been able to watch of Virginia Tech so far. But just kind of watching them, and the numbers kind of back it up. I think Rechsteiner was one of 2 players on the team to average more than 2 assists a game. He led the team with about 3 per game. It was just a lot of guys trying to create for themselves. And you like that Rechsteiner has that ability, because there are going to be moments in time where he's going to have to size up a defender, create space for himself, get a jump shot up, get to the rim, whatever it may be. But in this system, which, really incentivizes you to share the ball with the way everybody moves, and honestly, it's easy to buy into, because that if you do the right thing, the ball is going to come back to you. I think Rechsteiner has a chance to both improve his efficiency and cut down turnovers, which, if you look at the commentary from the Virginia Tech fan base, that would be the one area Rechsteiner could probably afford to improve. There were some games where he racked up 4 or 5 turnovers. If you look at his averages for the season, they're fine, about 2 a game. But 37% from the floor, only 30% from 3-point. Those are targets that you would like to improve. But again, those were a lot of tough shots that he was having to make. And I just think getting in a rhythm, having more shooters around you, having more structure offensively, having better flow, a lot like what we saw, with Neat Clifford. And I probably got to stop going back to that comparison because not every single high major transfer that comes into CSU is going to be able to succeed the way that Neek did. But I think that's the thought process, right? You take somebody who was maybe not maximized in a way that they could be at their previous stop. You put them in this system, you put shooters around them, you put athletic bigs that are going to be able to, come to the top of the key. You can do a little 2-man set, run the pick and roll, that type of stuff. It's just going to give him a lot more options offensively. And I think it's going to take some of the stress off of him to try and do too much, which, in this couple of instances where I did see him get a little bit turnover happy, I really think that was it. It wasn't like he was out there getting his pocket picked at midcourt like he's not capable, just trying to force passes and trying to do a little too much. But at CSU, I think he's got a nice chance to really develop well under Ali Farokhmanesh. I think he'll be the starting point guard day one. And while he will have room to grow as a true facilitator, he is bigger and stronger than Isaiah or Cayenne, where you can see it coming downhill. He's able to get to the rim with ease. He is, confident enough to pull up and put that jump shot up as well. But I think Rechsteiner has an opportunity to be a really solid addition. I'm really excited about him. I think CSU has done a good job of addressing needs this offseason. As far as some other needs go, though, I do have a couple of guys that CSU basketball fans should keep an eye on, some targets that either were just on campus or going to be on campus later this week. We're going to start with Augustina. I think it's Q Dulis. It's a little bit tough for the pronunciation. Eastern European, 6'8", 215-pound power forward out of the Virginia Military Institute. Actually started at Indiana State, ended up at VMI this past year, where he had an awesome season based on what I've heard behind the scenes. On campus yesterday, I haven't heard anything in terms of a commitment, so maybe wanted to sleep on it, maybe wants to keep his options open, but he is somebody to keep an eye on. Highly, highly skilled. I think if you bring him in, he'll start at the 4 for you. And then you can bring Kerry Booth off the bench and allow him to kind of grow behind the scenes as a player. Average 15 points a game, 6 rebounds, 44% from the floor, 30% from 3-point, shoots about 3 threes per game. That's not really his strength. It's more to keep the defense honest. He's impressive on the drive. He's got a quick first step, nice off the Euro. I mean, like, not to embrace stereotypes, but he kind of fits the mold of that European basketball player that just comes over, plays a team first mindset, highly, highly skilled, a great dribbler, great passer. He's 81% from the line on about 6 attempts per game. He's aggressive. He puts his head down and gets to the hoop. 10, 20 plus point performances this past season. He's got a really deep bag. And I think, again, he's somebody, if you land him, can be a starting forward for you potentially day one. And now you really feel good about the front court at that point, because you've got a high caliber athlete that if he hits, and Kerry Booth could be huge for you, but then you're not dependent on him, really being something that we haven't seen him prove to be able to be at this stage of his career. Has a high ceiling, and you're hoping to bring that out of him. But just bring somebody in that's a little bit more experienced, a little bit more refined, somebody that can make up for some of that lost offensive production for you. I mean, you're losing for the second straight year 5 of your top 6 scorers. Like, it is a little bit of a tough spot here. But he is somebody that I think has a really high ceiling. I think he can be kind of an under the radar addition for CSU. I have read that Oklahoma State is in on him, or I might be mixing that up. I think it might be Oklahoma State's in on the next guy, Jevin Muniz, 6'6" wing, Florida Gulf Coast, Dunk City, if you remember from the tournament a couple years ago. We're going to talk about him more in just a second. Then we'll get into CSU football. I do need to take a quick break here. I got to pay the bills. So let's do that, and then we will get into Jevin Muniz, another target for CSU men's basketball. With Empire today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, as well as a price match guarantee. Empire today is the best place to get new flooring. So, of course, they have copycats out there. They can't touch Empire, not on their quality, not on their service, not on their speed. What they do is they advertise a bunch of low quality junk that Empire simply won't carry. Empire's philosophy, it's not to overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes and, really just overwhelm you. They're just trying to show you the best of the best. They want to sell you the type of flooring they would put in their own home. Virtual Floor Designer is a great way to see how any new floor will look in any space. Just snap a picture, boom, easy as that. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. If you do, all listeners can get a $350 discount when they use the promo code DNVR. Restrictions to apply. See empiretoday.com/DNVR for details. I also want to shout out Lucy Nicotine, 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. Lucy Breakers are nicotine pouches with a little bit of bonus Jonas. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken open to release extra flavor and hydration, prevent kind of that nasty, paper feeling in your mouth like you were chewing on a straw wrapper or something like that. I love mango. I love cinnamon. Those are probably my two favorites, but you can't go wrong with just like a classic mint. Great if you're getting some work in, you got to lock in the afternoon, maybe feeling a little bit tired. Great if you're just trying to unwind, watch the game. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/DNVR. Use the promo code DNVR to get 20% off your first order. Lucy does have a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Again, that's lucy.co. Use that code DNVR to get 20% off. Here comes the fine print. Lucy products only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine, and nicotine is an addictive chemical. All right, like I said earlier, we are going to transition into CSU football in just a second here. I will play some interviews for you. I will hear what Jay Norvell has to say about the backup quarterbacks. We'll kind of talk about that battle as well, get into some receiver targets. If you're just tuning in, though, we at the moment are talking about transfer portal targets for CSU men's basketball. Recently picked up a commitment from Brandon Rechsteiner, who is assumingly your day one point guard. You also are in the mix for a couple of guys, including Agustina Acudalis, who is really, really skilled for, and Jevin Muniz, 6'6" wing, coming over potentially from Florida Gulf Coast. Good Lord. I have read that Oklahoma State is also in the mix, so we'll see there. He's a guy who started at Delaware State for his first 2 years. 2 seasons ago, in particular, was really impressive statistically, about 15 points per game. That dips to about 11, but he's got a great frame. He'd give you some of the length that you lose with Nick Clifford no longer in the mix. Not super flashy or anything like that. Like, he's not from what I can see, not the type of scorer that Nick was, but he's a handful coming downhill. He's big, he's strong, he uses his length well on both sides of the ball. Is going to give you a little bit of size defensively and then somebody to throw, out along the perimeter. I think he'd be a really nice addition for you, and I think he fills basically your last true need at this point, which is, a wing. If you can add another 4, if you can add another forward, that'd be great. I'd also be open to adding another point guard potentially. I think you feel pretty good about the possibilities with Rechsteiner and then JoJo McKeever, coming up through the program. But if you add Muniz, 6'6" wing, somebody who's played a lot over the last 3 years, and you put, again, some guards around him with structure, Florida Gulf Coast, not the best team this past year, I think it's really going to help you from a spacing standpoint. It gives you multiple guys that are capable of stepping out and stretching the floor, but also, can get to the rim, which is big. I think the physicality that CSU played with this year, and Ali actually talked about this when he came on the pod, but it was a big strength for the Rams last year. It wasn't quite like a couple of years ago where if everything wasn't perfectly, executed from a finesse standpoint, if you weren't 35% plus from 3-point with 20 assists, it just didn't really have a chance to win. I felt like when the games got ugly at times and, teams were able to muck things up defensively against CSU, that ability to just put the ball on the floor and either get a quality look at the rim or get to the free throw line was such an advantage for CSU, especially in that second half of the season. And to me, Muniz is somebody, along with Agustina, who we just talked about, who gives you a lot of that mentality. Like, you've gone out, you've added some shooters, you've added an explosive forward, you've added a point guard. Now you have some guys that can just get to the line, get you 12 free throw attempts a game. Also going to get you some easy points in the paint, just allow you to make up for some of what's been lost. Kind of watching these guys again, like, maybe not quite as refined, maybe not quite as flashy, but Muniz is just somebody who I think his size and athleticism is really going to be a strength. And you do have to respect him as a shooter. I mean, he's pretty solid on those catch and shoot opportunities, has room to grow as a shooter. But again, kind of a lot like what I've said with Rechsteiner and some of these other guys, you put them in this CSU offense and it's just going to make things easy for you because you're going to get so many quality looks per game. It's less pressure on the individual just inherently because of the style that this program loves to play with. We'll see. Keep an eye on both of those guys. Again, heard Agustina on campus yesterday. Jevin, I believe, is on campus a little bit later this week. So potentially a couple of big-time commitments in the mix for CSU down the line. We are going to transition here to CSU football, and we are going to play some interviews. If you missed it, by the way, the spring portal window, it just opens today, April 16th through the 25th. So inevitably, there will be a couple of guys who look at their situation and decide to go elsewhere. I haven't heard any murmurs about the staff being super worried about losing any major expected contributors or anything like that. Again, things can change in a hurry. It only takes one DM to change everything. But I will be interested more so to see how CSU is maybe able to address a couple of their potential holes. I don't think the starting kicker is on the roster right now. I think they could use another wide receiver with experience if they were able to get one. I don't know if it's a necessity, but it certainly would be nice. You could use another interior defensive lineman, secondary depth, just given how many guys were lost. They added a lot of guys this offseason, but you just never really know. I actually put on Twitter yesterday, Colorado Mesa standout. Maybe he could be an option for some safety depth at CSU. Jason Tomey, Colorado kid, highly productive, runs pretty well, 9 interceptions, 17 PBU over the last 2 seasons. Obviously, that's at the D2 level, so would be a pretty significant step up. But I do think he is someone to potentially keep an eye on, just given that originally he was a walk-on at Mesa, but Trent Matthews was who gave him that opportunity. Trent Matthews was his defensive coordinator the last 2 years, and in which he was very successful. Trent obviously now back at CSU. Could that have been a conversation behind the scenes? Why don't you follow me up to Fort Collins? I believed in you in the first place, put you in this spot to thrive. Now do it with me up at CSU. Like, maybe he's not going to play quite as much as he would have at Mesa. But he is somebody I think that's at least worth keeping an eye on, just based on his production and that relationship that he has with Trent Matthews. Could be interesting. One guy who is on campus, though, in the secondary and is turning heads is AJ Noland. He had a one-handed interception in the scrimmage on Saturday. He's a guy who's really making the most of this opportunity. Aiden Hector, a little bit dinged up, probably presented an opportunity for him, but I think he's somebody that, based on what he's shown so far, is one of the front runners to start at safety for CSU this year. Really rangy, nice frame, and a good athlete. So here's that interview from Saturday afternoon with AJ Noland, up-and-coming safety for the Rams.
How you feeling coming into camp this year, another time around?
I mean, I just feel like a lot more confident. Felt like, over the course of from last season, just got a lot stronger in the weight room. We had guys like Hank and Jack that I was just learning from a lot this year. So I knew coming into this year there was going to be open battle for a lot of positions. So I know I just had to come in with some confidence, try and play my game. But shout out to, all the strength staff and all those guys for, getting to me to the spot.
So you grew up in one system, and now all of a sudden they're going to change it. What have the changes? What has Tyson brought to this? And what's kind of altered in your mind of what you thought about how you play?
I mean, first of all, I want to show all love to Coach Banks. Coach Banks recruited me out of high school. Love playing for him. Summers brings, a different type of defense. We're going to pressure, and we're going to say, you're going to have to beat us one-on-one. That's really what it is. You got to go out there and win your one-on-one battles. There ain't no hiding on the field this year. It's like if you're out there, they're going to attack you, and they're going to know you're in a one-on-one battle. So you just got to believe in yourself, believe in your teammates around you that they're going to do what they're supposed to do, and then it'll all tie together as that goes on.
Have the guys embraced that mentality?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like we've grown a lot since the first week of camp. It was really, when you switch from a system like that, it's really hard to change your mindset. So for me personally, I really had to get that mindset I know when we bring the pressure, that ball's going to come out quick. So I really got to, be like, hey, there's 3 routes they're going to run. They're going to run a mesh, a slant, or a fade ball. And once you start understanding that in your mind, I felt like me personally, I was able to play one-on-ones a lot better, just have a lot more confidence when I know my teammates are going to get to the quarterback.
What's kind of your pitch, if you will, for what gets you on the field? What's your game?
Well, what do you mean exactly?
Like you were saying, there's competition for spots. Well, why should you be out there? What do you bring to the field?
I mean, there's obviously a lot of time. So, nothing's set in stone, but I feel like I bring a sort of athleticism in the secondary. I feel like I can run, I can cover, tackle. So, just like all my other teammates, I'm just excited, excited to show my talents. There's only been 3 weeks, so, there's still a lot of valuing to do. But I just feel like I bring a sort of athleticism to the secondary that go out there and make some plays.
A really nice pick on the sideline there. Could you just walk us through your view of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was going to be in the post on that play of how the formation came out. So I saw our quarterback turn his shoulders, and he was staring at it. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna run my butt over there. Saw the ball in the air, and then from there I was just playing high school receiver again. So that was just the receiver and me just coming out. So
pretty fun to come.
Yeah.
Up
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
for sure.
Like you said, I mean, there's more responsibility, more one-on-ones. Is it enticing in a sense, knowing there's going to be more disruption?
I mean, it's. Sorry, can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, just having those opportunities to get more big plays.
Yeah, there's definitely you're either going to make the play or you're not going to make the play, and people are going to notice. So you have a lot more opportunity to put stuff on the stat sheet than necessarily sitting in 2 spots or 3 spots. But I love that. I love being on the island. I love all eyes on me. It's just a mentality you got to have that you're going to go out and win it. If you don't have confidence in it, it's not going to go well. So.
You got a lot of new faces in the secondary. Just how are guys gelling, and who stands out to you?
I mean, I think we're all gelling super well. Those corners, I mean, we got some great coverage corners. CJ, GZ, just a bunch of guys that came in, and they've been balling. They've been stepping up. Our whole safety room is new, basically. We had, Jake Jarmalowicz is from Holy Cross. He's a great human being, even greater player. Guys like Jace Bella, Tyson Williams, Jet Vincent, all stepping up. So we're just excited to, have that opportunity to showcase our talents because, last year is pretty set in stone with our secondary. Just come in and learn from the older guys. But this year we've had a real chance to show our talents, and I think we're all just excited for that.
Really appreciate the time there. Again, I'm highly intrigued by AJ Noland, and I really appreciate how thoughtful he was with a lot of those responses. I love an athlete that's willing to ask you to be more articulate with your question, and you could hear, from some of the responses he gave there, just an intelligent guy with a bright future. I think some of the things that stood out in terms of what he said, it is exciting that there is a little bit of unknown with the secondary, just given as great as Howell and Blackburn were, those guys will have all-time, legacies. It's kind of exciting to know that there's some possibility here for some of these young up-and-comers to make an impact. I talked about Jet Vincent last week. Noland, though, is somebody who's definitely turning heads. He talked about some of the cover corners. CSU went out in the portal, added a lot of guys with very prestigious backgrounds, former 4-star players. CJ Blocker has definitely looked intriguing. Lamondre Joe coming over from Missouri State is also somebody who I think is going to be really productive. Jahari Rogers has been a little bit dinged up of late, so I haven't had as much of an opportunity to see him. But I do think the secondary is intriguing going into this year, and I would say top to bottom, it's more athletic, which should be a strength. We're going to transition to offense. We're going to talk quarterbacks and wide receivers. I'm going to play a clip of Jay Norvell here in just a second. I do need to shout out a couple of our other partners. Got to pay the bills, and then we'll keep it going. Between work, what we see on social media, everything that gets thrown our way, life can be a lot. It can be easy to get worked up. Our friends at Coors Light encourage you to choose a chill state of mind. You know, whether you're dealing with family issues, work issues, stressed about travel, it was tax season. That's never fun. It's all about how we deal with it. You know, I talk a lot about being mindful and you know, going and spending some time in the sunshine, getting deep breaths, all of that. That's how I personally am able to choose a chill state of mind. Then when I'm kicked back, when I'm chilling, when I've got the game on, crack open a little Rocky Mountain Magic. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Choose chill this spring and reach for a Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by visiting CoorsLight.com/DNVR, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also would like to talk to you about another longtime partner of ours that does it as well as anybody. That, of course, is Shady Rays, an independent sunglasses company that offers a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Durable frames, crystal clear optics. It makes them the perfect option for any outdoor adventure. Maybe you're walking the dog. Maybe you're hitting the trails this summer, or mountain biking, or you know, river rafting or whatever. You can do it in your Shady Rays, knowing that if you happen to lose or break them, every single pair is backed by lost and broken replacements. Nobody does better by their customers than Shady Rays. I wear mine all the time. Going to be hitting the road this weekend for a little bit of NHL playoff action. You know, I'll have probably both of my pairs of Shady Rays with me because I want a little bit of variety. They've got a little bit of something for everyone. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays giving out the best deal of the season. All you got to do, go to shadyrays.com, use that code DNVR, and you're going to get 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I don't know why every time I do that read, I have to fight the urge to say 5 stars with like a Borat impersonation. I don't know why. It's just where my brain goes. I don't know if that would make the fine folks at Shady Rays happy or not, but I hear it in my brain every single time. We're going to keep talking CSU football. At the very end, we're going to get into jersey retirement. If you got any questions, comments, etc., throw them in the Toyota chat. We'll star them, come back at the end of the show. But I did want to talk about the battle for QB2 for the backup quarterback going into the season. I also wanted to talk about some wide receivers that we maybe haven't focused as much on in recent weeks. So now's a great time for that. We're going to start here with a clip, though, of Jay Norvell. This was following the second scrimmage. The quarterbacks were live. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi did not participate. Makes sense. You don't want your starting quarterback taking shots in camp, but it was live for the backups, which made it kind of fun to watch. Interesting to see how they were able to handle it. These guys have not, taken a lot of live reps in the last couple of years, basically since high school. Brousseau a little bit, but here is Jay Norvell talking about trying to build depth and kind of what he's seeing from the quarterbacks and the wide receivers in spring so far.
We're further ahead than we've been in the past, and we've got a lot of new players, a lot of new defensive players especially. Really like our offensive additions as well. The new tight ends have been really good. Rocky Beers and Carlos have done a really good job. Jackson's keeps improving in practice. But our defensive additions have been really good. I think we're more athletic. I think we're better coverage-wise, and our guys are learning the techniques up front. So really pleased with our progress there. Got a good look at our young quarterbacks today. Those guys were live. Made some mistakes, but made a lot of plays. And we got to see, of those young players who can lead us.
Is it benefits of this style is that you have more people, more active most of the time?
No doubt. We don't have many people sitting around, and just like every spring you have injuries, and that kind of affects how you can practice, how you can scrimmage. We'll watch the live reps a little bit this week, try to freshen up for the last week, but really pushing situations and teaching the new concepts that we want to learn.
Have you seen people, because they are not standing around, they're picking up things quicker, you're developing maybe in areas of depth,
Yeah.
guys are picking up systems quicker?
Yeah, we have to develop our backup players, and we're trying to get continuity with our first units, but we really want to pressure our backup players because over the course of the year, they're going to have to play for us. So it's really going to determine if we can have a championship group or not, if we can develop that quality depth.
Was that kind of why it was a day for JB and DC at quarterback rather than having BFN
No,
out
it's
there?
just those kids have not played live for a couple years. And so, when you're a backup quarterback, sometimes you get in a rhythm of practice and you just don't have the sense of urgency. And so we wanted to make them live and see how they would respond. And they both did a nice job today. We like those young quarterbacks. They think they have a future here, and we want to give them a chance to play real football.
You talked about the tight ends. The receiver group may be a little different than you anticipated a couple months ago, but who stood out to you in that receiver group?
Well, Tay had a really good day. He made some big plays out there. Jordan Ross has had a good spring. Tommy Maher's been fantastic. We got a couple really good players that are hurt right now at the receiver position. We should also get Jackson Warren back at tight end. So those rooms are going to be quite different in another month than they are right now. But again, we're building up backup, start getting a lot of reps in that group, and a lot of those receivers are stepping up, making plays. So they're all going to have to play for us.
All right, we will talk about the receiver depth, which maybe the top end talent isn't quite what it's been the last couple of years, but I think top to bottom in a really good spot, and maybe that could be a strength for CSU as the season goes on. I do think the lack of depth there ended up burning the Rams, particularly in the bowl, when you didn't have Torrey to lean on, and then obviously a Goody in person end up hopping in the portal, put you in kind of a bad spot with a lot of unproven players. So I do think that developing some of the depth here at some of these other key positions is going to be key for CSU, especially if they're going to be able to be a Mountain West championship contending program in their last season in the Mountain West, which would be kind of cool to see. Obviously been a really long time, quarter of a century almost, since the Rams have been able to win the league on the football side, 2002. But I am interested to see kind of how this group shakes out. I'm also interested to see who ultimately ends up being the backup quarterback come this fall. I've been asked a lot of times, my thoughts on the quarterback room, if anybody's going to push BFN for that starting role. Based on everything that I've seen, it's not a real competition. Braden is the starter. He will be the starter. Be prepared for that. I do think, though, that QB2 is still very much up for grabs. Brousseau's had that role now for, the last year and a half or so, 2 years. Curry has come in and he's getting more reps, which is exciting. I'll be honest, obviously there are some areas where Braden is going to have to improve this next year, and some of the inconsistencies have at times been frustrating. I think he's very clearly the best option that they have right now. Both Brousseau and Curry have their moments. Both can throw a pretty ball. Curry in particular throws a nice lofty deep ball. He had a play where he hit, I think it was Keenan Higgins for a touchdown against the number 1 defense in that scrimmage. They're also fairly inconsistent themselves, and I think that there's a reason, the staff is kind of going into this year with no real desire to try and see if anybody else should be the starting quarterback, because I think it's kind of clear who the best option is as of now. Obviously, third-year starter, a ton of experience. He's got a big arm, all of that. But I am curious to see, are both of these backups still on campus come August, just given that it is very, very clear that Braden is going to at least be the guy going into the season. So much can happen over the course of the year. I mean, injuries. If he doesn't live up to the standard, then, maybe you make a change down the line. Those are obviously possibilities, but it's very clear he's going to be a starting quarterback. If you're Jackson Brousseau, you've already, stuck it out a couple of years. Do you maybe look elsewhere? His brother is a tight end at Utah State. So, I mean, potentially even within the league, if you're Curry, do you feel like maybe you could have a chance to play somewhere else? Would that path be a little bit easier elsewhere? We shall see. But it is kind of interesting to me how that is going to shake out here between now and the start of the season. It does matter, who your backup quarterback is, because again, there's a million different scenarios in which that could come to fruition where he's having to see the field. As far as the receiver groups go, we've talked a ton about Jordan Ross. It's very clear, both based on what we've seen and said so far, and obviously what Jay Norvell said there in the interview, that there are high hopes for the tight end room. Jackson Warren was somebody that they thought could be an impactful pass catcher for CSU in his first year. Unfortunately, got hurt in camp, missed the season, separated shoulder, basically. He's hasn't been 100% cleared yet, but he is making plays in practice. He's turning heads. Rocky Beers has been better than expected. I think and again, lofty comparison, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I think he could have a Dallin Holker type impact in terms of coming in and just immediately being a major factor for the offense. Even, Carlos Anaya has looked good. He's got good size. They definitely have the best size that they've had in that tight end room in a long time. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to run some 2 tight end sets, and you throw, Beers and Warren out there, or Anaya. That's a lot of size, good athleticism to attack up the seam. It gives you options in the red zone. And then, you have some receivers out wide that maybe are a little bit undersized, both Jordan Ross and Tommy Maher, not the biggest guys in the world, but they're great route runners. They've got good hands. They both run well. They just always seem to be open, which, that's a skill. And you don't have to be the biggest receiver in the world to be really successful in the Mountain West. We've seen that plenty of times over the years. As far as some guys who we maybe haven't focused as much on, Norvell mentioned Tay Lanier, who we're going to play an interview from momentarily. 6'1", 165-pound senior, started his career at New Mexico, actually originally committed to CSU. I think for academic reasons, ultimately ended up at Northern Arizona, although I may be mistaken there. But it comes for full circle in the end. After a couple of years with NAU, now ends up at Fort Collins after all. Had a great day on Saturday, but he's probably been, outside of Jordan Ross and Maher, the most consistent receiver that we've seen from the Rams throughout the spring so far. Part of that is, with Kojo and Winfield not participating, it's created more opportunities for guys like him. But to his credit, he's taking advantage of it, and he's got a nice frame. 6'1", 165 pounds. He's strong. I think he's somebody that could be in line for a big year. We're going to play an interview from him in just a second, but a couple of other guys you should keep an eye on. Keenan Higgins, again, had a touchdown on Saturday, 6'4", 170 pounds, San Jose State transfer. He was injured most of last year, but he's been in the system now for 2 years. Gives you a little bit more size. Again, you don't have a ton of length at receiver this year. He is one of the guys that gives you a little bit of size you can throw out, and as does Stephon Daly, 6'3", 180-pound redshirt sophomore. Had a nice bowl game, 4 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. Was really, really productive at the high school level, though. 109 catches for over 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns his last 2 years at Sierra Linda High School, which I believe is from the Phoenix area. He was a track star as well, state champion leaper, played hoops. So he's very, very explosive, and somebody you can see from an athleticism standpoint probably near the top of the wide receiver group. The big key for him, and this is something that I heard from Savage back in the day, and I think continues to be true, Daly's just got to be more consistent with the process. He's got to practice better, more consistently. He's got to be a better route runner. He's just got to do the little things, because he's got the intangibles. He's got the athleticism, the things that you can't really coach. It's just, now can you, lock in, be mature, and take things to the next level, and really make the most of this golden opportunity that's here. There are veteran receivers that are dinged up. There are guys that you hoped would be in the mix, like LB, that ultimately aren't. This is as good of a chance as he's had at this stage of his career to kind of grab the reins and really be an impact receiver for the Rams. Love his size, love the explosiveness. Can you now basically earn your way onto the field by doing the little things right consistently enough? And if you can, he can be really good. But that's, again, like how somebody like Tommy Maher, despite being the smallest guy in that room, I mean, when he's not wearing pads, probably he looks better than me. Don't get me wrong. But like from a size standpoint, like not that much bigger than me. He's not bigger than me, but you know what I mean? Like that's how somebody like Tommy Maher is able to get on the field. It's not because, he's going to win an Olympic gold medal. It's not because he's a burner. It's just because he works his ass off. He always gets open and he catches absolutely everything that goes his way. And I'm really excited about him. But I think some of these other guys in Higgins, Daly, and Lanier have a very bright future, as well. So here is that interview with Tay Lanier, kind of giving some insight into how the transition at CSU is going and why he's loving life in Fort Collins. Tay, just what are your thoughts on how you performed individually and how the receiver group is? Just how are your thoughts on how the receivers are performing here in spring?
I feel like our group performed well. Last practice we had a bad practice, so we just came back and bounced back. Me personally, I feel like I can get better on some things. I left a few plays out there, but yeah, I feel like I can get better.
Almost came to CSU a couple years ago, ends up kind of coming full circle. Just how does it feel to be in Fort Collins and how are you adjusting to life here?
Man, it feels good. I wish I was here 2 years ago, but that wasn't God's plan for me. God's timing is always right. So me being here is just the right timing for me.
What do you think you can bring to this program? What will fans see on Saturdays?
A lot of experience, a lot of energy, a lot of dances after I score, and just a lot of energy.
How was it today, taking some shots in that 2-minute drill, going one-on-one against DBs live?
It was good. Our DBs, it's not as easy as it was at NAU. Our DBs is good. They push me to be better because if I lack a play, then they're going to get me. So I got to get them more than they do.
Do you have any specific guys that you're having some real competition with in camp against those DBs?
Block, Jeezy, Chauncey, CJ, Jahari, all the DBs.
Yeah.
Are those guys talkers or is it a lot of vocal back and forth?
Jeezy is a talker, Chauncey is a talker, CJ and Block, they just be quiet.
Yeah. How's your relationship with the quarterbacks coming along? Obviously no Braden today, but just with that group as a whole.
Yeah, it's good. I'm from the same city as Darius Curry, so we always played for the same organization when we was younger, but we never played on the same team, so we play on the same team now. JB, I like playing with him, and Brady, Brady's gonna be great.
Is that kind of neat to come full circle with DC?
Yeah. Excuse my language, but yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. Kind of a cool story. Darius Curry and Tay Lanier growing up in the same area, coming up in the same youth organization, which we saw a really significant presence from out at the Arizona Bowl. So, maybe that could end up being a neat storyline at some point. But again, I'm pretty intrigued by Tay Lanier, and I think he's somebody that can be productive. He's gotten a lot more actual live game reps than the majority of, the players that you have on campus at the moment. And it's good to see him making the most of this opportunity. Probably would have been somebody that you more anticipated to be like a number 2, even maybe a number 3 wide receiver if Lewis Brown and Kojo and Armani and all these guys were healthy and in the mix and were not in trouble in LB's case. But you get the point, like he's probably not the guy that in December we all would have been forecasting as a potential breakout candidate for the Rams. But to his credit, really doing a good job of making the most of these reps here in spring. And we'll ultimately see if that's able to translate in August. I've always tried to be really straightforward when it comes to spring football commentary. I just think it's very easy to overreact and draw conclusions that are not necessarily going to be accurate, because the reality is you're going to have a lot more guys on campus come August. You've still got freshmen. You're going to add transfers. Some guys are going to leave. Like there's a lot that can change between now and then. And we've seen plenty of guys that were spring ball darlings essentially out of necessity. Maybe they were playing because the depth wasn't quite there yet. And, ultimately you went out and added more guys in the portal or there were injuries or whatever. And then, by the time mid-August rolls around, they're not on the field at all. So I do want to be real with you guys and just not overreact too much. But I do think it gives you a nice idea of what guys you should at least have in the back of your mind and should be following going into the process. And I would say Lanier is one of those guys. If I had to bank on the spring standouts that I'm most confident in their ability to make an impact for CSU this fall, Rocky Beers feels like a lock so long as he's healthy to be a stud at tight end. I think Jalen Dupree is going to have an awesome year in the backfield. I think he can be an all-conference caliber running back. I think we've really only scratched the surface with just how solid he can be, finally healthy again. I've heard behind the scenes that he feels really comfortable in his playbook now, and it's just really slowed down for him, which makes sense. Like when you jump up from the high school level, especially when you're as dominant as he was, like he's got Derrick Henry type insane stats where you score like 100 touchdowns in high school. I don't think it takes all that complicated of a scheme for somebody like him to dominate at the high school level. But now all of a sudden, you get to this level and the playbook is just going to be so much deeper. And I do think that was a little bit of a process for him, just kind of getting comfortable and getting to a place where he's able to react without having to think. But now that he's in that spot, and again, now that he's healthy, he was a little dinged up at the end of last year. Man, I think Dupree is poised for a massive, massive season, and I'm really, really excited about him. Grayson in the Toyota chat says, love this show. I'm one of the few Colorado natives left. I root for all teams Colorado, and the Rams are one of my teams, even though I went to CU and love my Buffs. Go Rams. I appreciate the love and support, my man. There definitely are not many shows that are going to be able to go as in-depth on CSU as we are here on this one. But I appreciate everybody that's rocking with us this morning. Before we get out of here, and again, if you guys have any other questions, comments, throw them in the Toyota chat. I would be happy to respond. I did just want to briefly touch on the controversial topic of number retirement. It's certainly nationally relevant and locally relevant based on what happened in Boulder. But I think it's really something that's also been kind of a point of discussion amongst Ram fans now for a couple of years, just given that you've had Isaiah Stevens and Trey McBride come through over the last couple of years who are just surefire picks to have their numbers retired at some point down the line. I ultimately subscribe to the belief that there are individuals who are so unique and rare that if you want to immediately retire their number, that it's justified. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on it from a CU angle because frankly, I don't give a shit. But like when somebody wins the Heisman, like Travis Hunter did, I think there's a pretty fair argument that, maybe nobody should ever wear that guy's number again in the program. That's obviously a very unique thing. Retiring Shador's number, I know like the optics of it and the politics that come into play because they've always kind of been associated as like the co-stars of CU. If you retire Travis and not Shador, it probably puts them in a weird position behind the scenes, especially given that his dad's the head coach and all that. Whatever. I think it's disrespectful to players like Cordell Stewart, even some of the other greats, from those early 90s. But I also, again, I don't really care. What I do think is that it should be the ultimate honor. And I think we as fans, and I think CU in this instance as a program, they're getting too swept up in the now. And I think it's recency bias. Like, I just think that there should be a cool off period because it's easy to get swept in the moment. If you would have asked me in 2013, after Capri Bibbs ran for 32 touchdowns or whatever it was, I probably would have been like, nobody should ever wear that 5 again. I probably would have said the same thing at certain points about Garrett Grayson or Rashard Higgins. And frankly, like, I think you just need to have really high standards because it's something that opens a can of worms for you if you do it too liberally. And I do like that CSU for football has a very strict standard. As far as I can tell, it was updated in 2012. There are some rules for CSU. A nominee must have been in good academic and athletic standing at CSU, must have been a consensus first-team All-American by a nationally recognized outlet. That's a really strong baseline that takes the majority of the guys that people will throw into the mix out of it. The student athlete must have distinguished themselves on a postgraduate basis, i.e., playing professionally, going on to make an impact or something like that. Obviously, the All-American status, there was an exception for John Mosley, but again, what he did in terms of the Tuskegee Airmen and, just the history that he made in that regard, like it was a no-brainer to retire his number. I see a lot of debates. I see a lot of people thrown out, a lot of great Rams over the years. Weston Richburg. I've seen Joey Porter. I've seen all kinds of names, and I think they're all great Rams. They all should be in the CSU Football Hall of Fame. They all should be in the CSU Athletics Hall of Fame. But having your number retired is a really select group, and having the qualifier of being a consensus All-American automatically limits the list anyways. I think there have only been 5. Mike Bell, stud defensive tackle in the late 70s, unfortunately had some off-the-field issues that I think will prevent him from ever getting his number retired. You've got Greg Myers, Trey McBride, and then Rashard Higgins and Michael Gallup. So out of that crew, to me, Trey McBride is really the only player from my lifetime that I think should have his number retired. And I don't say that lightly because there have been a lot of awesome Rams. Bradley Van Pelt was an awesome Ram. Garrett Grayson was an awesome Ram. But this is another level of recognition. Like, this should mean something that goes far greater than that. And I think if you do it too often, not only are you going to run out of numbers that you're able to use as a program, it just takes away from the meaning of what it's supposed to be. Like, this should truly be the most significant honor that you could receive outside of them putting your name on the field or naming the stadium after you or something like that. And obviously, with Sonny Lubick Field, we've rightfully honored, the greatest coach in our program's history. I just think that it's one of those that gets thrown around far too lightly. I remember it was coming up after the Miko Rantanen trade on the Avalanche side, like if Miko was somebody that should have his number retired. And I think that's kind of died down after, how some of this has played out in recent months. But he's somebody who's basically top 10 in every, major offensive category. He won a cup, was a great player here for a long time. Shouldn't have his number retired. There should be levels to this. And I just think we at times kind of, especially in the social media era with the way we frame things and everything has to be such a bold take, we go too far when it comes to this type of stuff and GOAT status and all these dumb cliches that get thrown around in sports commentary. And while I understand why you want to be a program that recognizes, great players, I do think there were stretches where even if you weren't going to retire a player's number, CSU was maybe lacking in the way that they were honoring the past, the way that they were, bringing guys back and having them be part of the program. But that's all been great under Norvell. Like, he's been as good as anybody of allowing the alumni to come back and to be a presence and to speak about, what being a Ram means to them and what it means to compete and represent the green and gold and all that stuff. And again, it's all a little bit silly. We all probably take this a little bit too seriously, make it deeper than it really is. But I think it's one of those that if you do it correctly, there really should not be any debate about a number retirement. Like, it should be so completely obvious that you can't really even argue against it. And I think that's why it's important to have a little bit of a buffer period. Is if it's been 5+ years and you still look back and you're like, without a doubt, that guy was one of the greatest to ever do it. Nobody's done it like him since. Then you can put him up there and not have any doubts. Again, the situation in Boulder is its own thing. But Dan Patrick always says, it's the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall of Really Good. And I think at times, as sports fans in the modern era, we want to give their guys their flowers, but we do so to a point to where it kind of minimizes what it's supposed to mean. And, maybe I'm sounding like an old man here, but it's not a participation thing, you can have been really good, have been one of the most significant players in school history and not even come close to what should be the standard for having your number retired. That's where I'm at. Again, I think if you've got 30 dudes' numbers retired, then what's the point of it? Is it really that special? That's where I'm at. I appreciate everybody that's rocked with us this morning. Fun show. Shout out to our guy Kale behind the scenes, making everything run so seamlessly. Would not be able to have any of these awesome clips integrated into the show if it wasn't for our guy. Shout out to all you guys for rocking with us. We'll be live again Friday morning. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor. We all silly like the mayor.